standing here live at the Kappa Asia Aviation Summit. It's the first time that this event has been back in person since 2019. We're here at the Capella Hotel on Singapore's Sentosa Island. Business leaders are streaming in behind me. It's about 20 minutes until the event starts. They're set to talk about many of the latest developments as well as the challenges that are facing the industry. Now, one person who's set to address all attendees later today is Sri Lankan Airlines CEO, Mr. Richard Nuttall, and he joins us today to give us a sneak peek at what he's going to be talking about. Richard, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Monica.
So it has been an extraordinarily difficult year for a few years, in fact, for commercial aviation. We have had COVID, rising oil prices, now talks of a looming recession. On top of that, you've been dealing with the economic fallout in Sri Lanka that really seems to have come to a head this year. How is the airline faring through it all?
So it has, as you say, it's been a fairly extraordinary time. Like all airlines, we were coming out of COVID, and COVID, everybody sort of built a big hole. There was no money there, and we came out of it. And sort of December to March, from December last year, things were really starting to pick up, and we actually made a profit. And we were looking forward to a solid year. We're living off cash flows. The economic situation in Sri Lanka means that we can't borrow money, and the government doesn't have money, so we have to do everything off cash flows. But we were fairly confident. And then obviously we have the war in Ukraine and oil prices start going up. Then we have the issues in Sri Lanka and the foreign media portraying it as perhaps not the safest place in the world and all the travel advisories. And then we get to July and August and there's no fuel in the country, so we have to start doing lots of tech stops, which adds extra cost burdens. But actually, it's such a strange world. We've got all of this pent-up demand after COVID. Sri Lanka has a huge diaspora. There are people trying to get backwards and forwards and see family, students trying to get to universities, businesses trying to get up on their feet again. And so against that backdrop, we've actually had the best first 6 months of the year in the last 15 years.
Okay, well, you came to the helm of Sri Lankan Airlines earlier this year. You would have had eyes wide open to both the problems within the airline as well as the country itself. Now the government has talked openly about wanting to partially privatize the airline. You've gone on the record as saying that you're open to the idea. Have there been any meaningful talks with any large investors to date?
So at the moment we're still going through the process. I think everybody's open to it. The country's going through an IMF process. IMF doesn't really like governments owning and supporting airlines because it's a debt liability. The government wants to privatize us. We're open to it. The benefit of being a national airline is financial support. The complications are governance. So at the moment, the government doesn't have the money to financially support us, so privatization is a good option. The airline is also carrying quite a lot of debt, both from COVID times and also from past operations. Debt that doesn't really involve today's operation, but it's something that we have to keep paying off. So privatization, if it provides some funding that allows us to reduce some of that debt, then that also helps our ongoing operations and reduces the debt burden and makes future growth a much more realistic option.
So if the government was successful in finding a large investor which would bring a much-needed cash infusion into the airline, what would be your immediate next steps? Like, what are your priorities?
So about 6 months ago, we had an RFP out there looking for aircraft replacement and growth. So we've got 7 aircraft that leave the fleet next year. But at the same time, when we look at Sri Lanka, tourism to Sri Lanka was really growing before COVID. And then as we came out of COVID from November, December to March this year, it was the fastest growing Google search tourist destination in the world. And tourism was really coming back. And we firmly believe that longer term that tourism will come back. The country issues at the moment are temporary, they're internal, they do not affect the tourist infrastructure, they do not affect Sri Lanka as a place to come, apart from making it a little bit better value for money, and it was already good value for money. And so we think the tourism will come back, and we think where we're placed in Sri Lanka, uniquely close to India, which is the second biggest economy in the world and growing fast, we think we need to be about twice the size we are today, and that's probably a 3, 4, 5 year project. But obviously if we privatise, that allows us to have the liquidity to go out there and lease aircraft to do that.
So to add to the many issues that you're currently dealing with, a formerly a cargo aviation carrier called Fitz Air has just launched into passengers with it to carry passengers in Sri Lanka. This happened just yesterday. How will this affect your recovery?
So I don't think it will affect us short term. So I mean, the reality is we compete with many airlines on many routes. So Fitz have started flying to Dubai and they're flying to Maldives. Well, you know, we've got Emirates, Qatar, you name them. We've got many, many bigger, more powerful airlines flying on those routes. So like any competitor, we need to watch them and see how they develop. But in the short term, you know, they're not our biggest worry. And you know, a low-cost airline for the country is not necessarily a bad thing if it brings more people.
And finally, you mentioned fuel shortages. The fuel shortage in Sri Lanka was so deep that earlier this year there were long-haul carriers that had to stop in India to refuel before coming in. This was both costly for your airline and reduce the amount of freight that you could bring in. Can you give us an update on what's happening with this situation?
Yeah, I mean, it was a fairly extraordinary thing. I've been in the industry for 30-odd years, and I've never had to run an airline without jet fuel in your home country. But I think it's more or less sorted out. The country has had well-documented problems bringing in fuel because fuel is a foreign currency cost in a country that has no foreign currency. But the thing about jet fuel is that airlines pay for it in US dollars. So once you have the supply up and running, then you can keep it rolling over. And so that's what's happened. So we think that the jet fuel supply now will be fairly solid going forward.